The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented. When Christ was on this earth, his mission was to heal men mentally, physically, and spiritually, bringing them back into his image. Dr. Edwin Krick has his Master's of Public Health and is an arthritis specialist. He's also Health Ministries Director of the Loma Linda University Church in California. In his discussion today, he'll explain how we can come into agreement with God's will that our Creator loves us and that we are indeed fearfully and wonderfully made.
Hello, I'm Ed Krick. Welcome to the series Wonderfully Made. We're talking in these segments about our musculoskeletal system, about arthritis, the immune system, and how to prevent some of the problems that come upon us as the years go by. Today we're going to talk about growing old gracefully. Nobody wants to think about getting old. It's kind of a bad thought, aging, and maybe eventually, of course, coming to the point where life seems to not have much meaning anymore. But let me tell you that many of the patients that I've seen in their 70s and 80s and 90s are feeling wonderfully healthy and happy and are enjoying the best times of their lives. So let's think about living it up healthfully and being able to enjoy the older years after all of the time when you've been able to prepare for the time when you'll be able to have more freedom, more money, opportunity to go places, to travel, to visit with family, be able to do that healthfully and happily and enjoy it. How can we grow old gracefully? When people hit their 30th or 40th birthday, they think, my, I'm getting old. But you know, it depends a lot about how you look at it. What is your perspective on life? I can remember a gentleman who came to my office when I was practicing in Kobe, Japan some years ago as a missionary. He was in his 50s, local newspaper reporter. He had been to a physician who was treating him for shoulder difficulties. He was having a problem moving his shoulder. It was painful to reach up over his head. He couldn't carry his briefcase very well, his attaché case. Reaching over into the back seat of the car was painful for him. He looked uncomfortable. He wasn't really enjoying life, but he was still fairly young, I would say, in his 50s. The physician that he had gone to said, well, you know, you're getting old after all, and you're going to have to put up with it. You just have to remember that time is passing by, your system is aging, and it's going to be uncomfortable. It's a part of the aging process. Well, when I examined him, I discovered that he actually had a bursitis. He was having difficulty with one of the structures around his shoulder, a lubricating sac, that helps keep the tendons moving smoothly and helps the muscles to stay strong and do their job well. He was so discouraged about having this first sign of aging come on that he was really quite depressed. I was happy to be able to tell him that this wasn't a sign of aging necessarily. It did happen more frequently as the years go by. But we were able to give him an injection and help his shoulder out dramatically. He went back to his writing and his work as a newspaper reporter, and I didn't hear from him again except on a social occasion when he said, hey, I'm feeling younger now, my shoulder's better. He actually wrote a column in his newspaper concerning getting old. And he said, I was so discouraged after realizing that my musculoskeletal system wasn't as young as it used to be, that I was getting depressed, but I found somebody that told me it's not necessarily aging. If you exercise and treat your musculoskeletal system well, you'll be able to use it for a long time and you'll be able to enjoy it. Well, you know, that's a big point as we look at life and the passage of time. The years go by. They seem to go by rather rapidly. And as we see them slipping, we think, no, I'm getting old. And we start to get depressed just thinking about it. As a matter of fact, I have people who come into me after having spent the weekend in the garden, for instance, or somebody who's played volleyball over the weekend, hasn't been used to it. They come in on Monday morning and they're stiff. They just feel like they're kind of tight. Muscles aren't working well. Is all this because I'm getting old? Well, of course we're aging. We're all getting older. But it's not necessarily the cause of the symptoms that you might have. It may be because you're not using your body consistently enough. If you're not exercising 20 minutes 3 times a week as a minimum, you're not getting enough exercise. And you can expect some of these things to pile up on you faster, and you can expect to be older at a younger chronological age. And that may be a significant thing to think about. It's not the calendar that tells the difference, but it's how you've treated your body. Have you been living healthfully? Remember, we're talking about living it up in the right kind of fashion, so that the living up will produce a healthy lifestyle that won't shorten our lives. It will both add years to our life and life to our years. Let's talk about those glasses that you put on. People put on different colored glasses depending on their perspective on life. Some people are optimistic, they see a glass half full. Others are pessimistic, they see it half empty. If you've done something a little bit extra that your musculoskeletal system wasn't used to, and you wake up stiff the next morning, you can expect that. That's not a sign of aging. That's a sign you haven't been doing your work to keep your body in the best possible shape. I think of the old saying, 2 men looked out through the prison bars, one saw mud, and the other saw stars. So it's either whether you look up or down, whether you exercise adequately or not, whether you're following the healthy lifestyle, whether you're living it up in the positive sense, or whether you're living it up is like you see on the television ads, where you're doing things to damage your body, such as using alcohol, tobacco, wasting away without getting adequate exercise. There's a tendency for us to think Murphy's Law. You all know what that states. If anything can go wrong, it will. And the corollary, or the second point is, of all the possible things that can go wrong, the worst will. Well, that's what happens when people don't use their joints well. You can expect some difficulties. You can expect some wearing out. And if your muscles aren't strong, if your cartilage isn't healthy because you've been exercising regularly, then you're going to expect wear and tear arthritis to show up a lot earlier than it would otherwise. As you get older, your joints will wear out. We talked previously in another segment about the fact that God has promised us youth like the eagles. But that's not perfection, is it? It's not going to be that way forever. You're not going to stay young till you're 150. People don't live that long in this world of ours. But we have been promised a better quality of life and really a longer life if we live healthfully. That's not a promise of perfection. That's not a guarantee you're going to live to 90. But it does say that if you use your body in the right way, you'll enjoy it for a lot longer and you'll be able to serve the Lord. You'll be able to do what you need to do for your family, for yourself, and enjoy life at the same time into much older years. Do you ever get too old, for instance, to get a joint replaced if it's worn out? We have wonderful technology these days. The orthopedic physicians are able to replace many of the joints in the body, especially the weight-bearing joints like the hips and the knees, and do it frequently. Many are done every day. Do you ever get too old to have that happen? Patients ask me that. Sometimes as we're talking about it at the university, we discuss the concept, when are you too old to get a joint replaced? Frankly, I don't think there is an age where we would say you're just too old to get it done. As a matter of fact, it depends on your mental capacity, your willingness to do things, your interest in doing things, your desire to do more than you can currently do. As long as you keep mentally alert and you're able to do the activities of daily living and the fun things of life, and your joint is impairing that, your knee or your hip, say, for instance, then getting that joint replaced at age 90 is not an inappropriate thing to do. I feel sad when I hear about people who are, say, age 65, and in some medical systems or some particular situation, that's the cutoff point. You can't get anything more done. We won't operate on you. We won't replace your joint. Because actually, at age 65, life may be beginning. So, since aging is inevitable, and it's going to be consistently happening, we can impact it to some extent. And let's talk a little bit about how we can do that. What affects the aging process? Well, first of all, your genes. You will be getting older faster, depending on what your heredity is, but you can't do anything about that. So we need to focus on what we can do something about, and that has to do with the lifestyle. Remember, we're talking about balanced lifestyle for promoting health and preventing disease. That's the theme of these segments. And so if you will balance your lifestyle with the proper nutrition so you don't get overweight, with appropriate exercise so that your muscles and joints are as healthy as they can be, they'll last you longer and you'll be able to enjoy them more. In addition to the diet and exercise components of the aging process, we also have to think about the environment. There's some things in the environment that you can impact, there's some things that you can't. The things that you can work on have to do with what you put into your body, such as smoking, alcohol. The things in your environment close around you, you may be able to impact to a certain extent by choosing a cleaner burning car, by living in an area where there's less pollutants in the air. That can be of some help. And of course, avoiding some of the chemicals and other things that we know about that aren't the best for our bodies. But more important than counting the years and the progress or worrying about your heredity is impacting the things that you can do something about. You can have a satisfying, happy, well-spent, rewarding series of years leading on up into the 90s, but it's your choice. Let's talk a little bit more about the people who have demonstrated to us that they can live into their 90s and still be healthy. Many of you have heard of Hulda Crooks, the Lady of the Mountains. She lives in Southern California, near where I do, and I have the privilege of seeing her out walking almost every day as I go to the university. She's out getting her morning walk, sometimes 2 or 3 miles. Occasionally she even carries a pack on her back with rocks in it to help her muscles get stronger. At age 65, Hulda Crooks would have been considered by many people to be kind of over the hill. It was retirement time. But she realized at that age, she'd been widowed, that she wasn't feeling the best. She was not strong, she didn't have a lot of energy, she tended to have cold feet. She decided, after listening to some presentations about physical fitness and about what can happen when you exercise, she decided to start her exercise program. And so at age 65, here was this diminutive lady, she's not over 5 feet tall, starting to walk. She gradually did more and more, progressing over a period of time, till she got to the point that she started to climb mountains. And do you realize now, at age 95, she has a record of having climbed Mount Whitney 23 times. She climbed Mount Fuji in Japan, and she's climbed over 80 of the peaks in California and the Sierras, all after age 65. She wasn't even exercising at that point in her life. So, you're not too old to start. You can't start yesterday, but you need to think about it and plan to start. And you can start by today, taking a short walk. If it's raining outdoors, walk inside the house for a little bit, or go down to the mall. That's one of the things that has been an innovation of our age, is go to the mall and walk. Some malls even sponsor a walking tour, so you can go out with your friends when it's rainy and stormy and walk in the mall. But you must get some exercise. It should be something you like. And these joints will be stronger and last you longer when you exercise. You can actually prevent osteoarthritis, in my view. Not everybody agrees with me, but I think the evidence now from our scientific research is that you can actually prevent osteoarthritis if you will exercise consistently over the years, 3 times a week. 20 minutes each time seems to be the minimum that we need to exercise. Let's turn to our text for today. In Psalms 102, verse 26, we have an interesting presentation about what happens with our world. They shall pass away, but thou endurest. Like clothes they shall all grow old. Thou shalt cast them off like a cloak, and they shall vanish. Psalms 102:26 from the New English Bible. What is it that's going to pass away? Well, if you read the context, the psalmist is talking about God's creation, about the mountains, about the heavens. They're going to pass away. In other words, they're growing older. We see changes in our earth, in our atmosphere. We talk about ozone layer being deprived. We talk about greenhouse effect. So the heavens and the earth are getting older, and there are changes that can be observed by scientists. But the psalmist is saying, God doesn't get old. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And He's the one that's taking care of our bodies in the sense of giving us the opportunity, the equipment to have long, healthy lives. And then we have to do our part. And that's where the exercise comes in, where the good diet, where the avoidance of the poisons that we know affect the body adversely. So we have our part to play. So even though the earth grows old, the heavens will grow old and pass away, God doesn't. And He's there promising us, actually, that He will keep our bodies younger. He will help us to stay young and have a feeling of youth and vigor, like the eagles, into our old age, if we cooperate and do our part. Let's think about this aging process a little more then. God's promised us to help avoid some of those changes of aging if we have health habits that are good. But when does the aging process begin, and when can we start doing something about it? Do you wait till age 65? Or can you do it when you're 40? Or should you start when you're 20? This is an interesting thing to think about. Maybe you could just ask yourself the question, when was the first time during my existence that I started to get older? Well, some people will say at birth. As a matter of fact, I heard an old joke about the fact that one group felt that when you started to age, it was when you were born. Some people say it's when you were conceived you start to age. Others say it's when the dog dies and the kids leave home. So getting older is different depending on how you define it. But if you look at it scientifically, we actually start to get old not just at birth, actually not just at conception, but actually it goes behind that, because when your mother was first conceived, in her body, in the forming fetus, in the eggs that would eventually become her children were being formed at that time. So if you want to be technical about it and scientific, we all start aging when our mother was conceived. Probably hadn't thought about it in that way, had you? Well, there's not much you can do about the time changing and about the progression of the years and the effect that it might have on your joints as they wear out. But we can grow old gracefully, if you will, by planning for these good health habits. Let's talk a bit then about the arthritis problems and what the osteoarthritis, which is the most common kind of arthritis, what it represents as far as the aging process is concerned. Osteoarthritis is a wear and tear problem. It's also called degenerative joint disease. The harmful things that can lead to osteoarthritis have to do with a certain amount of stress. Now, we all have stress on our joints. As you walk and as you exercise, there's a little bit of stress there, but that's good stress because it helps the body prepare for more stress in the future. It kind of puts money in the bank, if you will. It's a charging of your batteries, so to speak. So what are the things that are listed here before us now that can cause this gradual wasting of the joint, if you will, or wearing out? Traumatic single impact loads. That means if you were to be on your back fence at 8 feet or so and jump down onto the ground, that would be a very traumatic load to your joints. Now, if your muscles are strong and if your cartilage is healthy, it's probably not going to damage you. If you increase that height quite a bit and jumped off the first story of your house, of course, that could be pretty damaging to your joints. Unfortunately, when that happens, even though there's some healing that goes on, that may not be perfect. When we think about the process of the joint health and what makes the joint healthy, as you look toward the cartilage and remember what happens with cartilage growth, there are no blood vessels in the cartilage, and so the cartilage may be damaged. When the cartilage is damaged, it doesn't heal well. It's one of the tissues in the body that just doesn't repair itself as well as we'd like. So if you have one of these serious injuries, like jumping off a roof or falling from some height, when the cartilage is damaged, it doesn't get back to its perfect shape that it was before. That's different, you see, from the bones and the muscles and the ligaments, which have within them the capacity to heal almost completely so that you really couldn't tell there'd been damage there before. At least functionally, there's no change. But the cartilage doesn't heal as well as the other tissues do. So it may, after a single traumatic event, just one time, that major fall, it can be damaged enough so that it will lead eventually to osteoarthritis. Let's look back then at some of the other causes in addition to that traumatic problem of a single fall, for instance. There's some other non-acute injury. Non-traumatic would mean not acute injury, but it can be a repeated systematic, if you will, or recurring load on the joint that's kind of a physiologic load. In other words, something that you would do frequently. And what are the things that would contribute to that? If you have a prolonged tension on muscles, say at work you're doing something that keeps your muscles really tight and you're just keeping in that same position. Or if you have an awkward posture, say you bend over to pick something up and you do it from the waist. You shouldn't bend from the waist really, you should squat down if you're going to pick something up. Bending from the waist it puts a lot of strain on the back and on your joints, and that could cause some small injury that would then gradually progress and become worse and worse. Motions that are repeated, continually repeated, such as a person who's using a jackhammer, that will cause damage to the joint. Or if you're lifting something heavy that's heavier than your body's able to manage, you can, as we all know, strengthen your joints. You can go to the fitness center, you can lift weights, and you can strengthen your muscles, and that will protect your joints, and you can lift heavier and heavier loads if you do it consistently and gradually. And then there's the vibration problem. Say you're using a jackhammer and that vibration is really on you and giving your joints a lot of difficulty. That way we can predict, actually, that you're going to end up with some damage to those joints. So if you think about the repetitive minor injuries and you try to avoid those, and at the same time prepare yourself for any kind of contingency, if you will, any kind of further future use of your joints by strengthening your muscles, by exercising consistently, then you'll have the protection in place that will keep your joints from being damaged. Let's look then at some other things that will back up our consideration of what happens when you're damaging joints. On the left-hand side, we see that person who's just fallen off the roof. He's crashing down onto the joint cartilage here, and he's damaging his cartilage in his ankles, his knees, and hips, and even to some extent in the back. So when you're jumping from a height, you can cause damage. The cartilage is also damaged in the center by someone using a jackhammer, for instance, where there's a lot of repetitive vibration-type injury, so to speak, to the cartilage. And of course, the body will help protect against that if the muscles are already strong. But if that's done over a period of time, say your lifetime job is holding onto a jackhammer, that could cause problem. But the one that's more pertinent to us as far as our practical approach to staying healthy is concerned is the figure on the right. And it is quite a figure, isn't it? When you start to become overweight, that puts increasing stress on your joint. And as that happens over time, those cartilages will wear out much faster. Now, there's a lot of problems that we can talk about as far as being overweight is concerned, and it's tough to lose your roll of fat once you get it. That's the sad part about it. Once you get that roll, and I've got a bit of a one that I don't want to show on camera here because I'm having trouble getting rid of it. But it is a challenge to get your weight to where it should be once you've gotten overweight. The hardest thing is to make those cells shrink, because once there's a fat cell in your body, it never disappears. It's going to be there your whole life. And that's why it's especially important for us to work with our children, young people, have them have ideal body weight with adequate exercise and avoiding too many calories so that they won't become overweight. Once you're overweight, it's very difficult to get those cells back down to a normal size, and you don't lose any more cells once they're on there. So it's when you're young that your cells are multiplying and you get more and more of them that's especially important to stay healthy and trim. That way it will protect you for the future and make it easier to maintain an optimal weight as time goes by. So osteoarthritis is one of the things that we can prevent. If we look at the causes of the osteoarthritis, we recognize that they're due to trauma often, they're due to damage that could be prevented to some extent. On the left, we see the normal joint space with the blue cartilage line there that's kept healthy by our exercise. On the right, you see a damaged joint. It could have been through being overweight for many years, it could have been some sudden trauma, it could have been the wear and tear of using those joints to an excess amount over time, and you'll notice the cartilage is all gone. There's bone on bone, and that can be very painful. Very difficult for that to be managed, for the fact of the matter is that that cartilage is not going to come back. No amount of healing process will bring back the cartilage once it's lost. You'll notice that the bones are a bit out of line. They've started to tilt toward each other there at the center. And that damage then will progress. It's like a ball bearing that has a worn spot on it. That's the place that gradually wears out more and more as time goes by. So to avoid that, we want to keep trim weight, keep strong, healthy muscles, and then as we use the balance in our lifestyle, the balance of exercise and diet to keep an optimal weight, those joints will stay healthier longer and they'll stay stronger. One of the areas of the body that has especially significant arthritis is in the back. It seems that almost everybody gets back arthritis at some time or another. We notice here on this picture the arrow pointing out one of these osteophytes, or spurs we call them, in the lumbar spine that will occur in many, many people. As a matter of fact, if you look at the persons in their 80s and 90s, you will find a little bit of spurring on everyone. Many of us start much younger than that. The point is that it doesn't necessarily cause pain unless a person has had either tremendous injury or has had repetitive problems of lifting too much, straining the back. Then gradually, of course, you can get difficulties. And there are many causes for problems with the low back, and we'll talk about those in another segment. The arthritis that's occurring here in the back is the result of long years of improper posture, of excess stress, of lack of muscle strength, and as time goes by, these processes add up to cause the degenerative change that you see with curvature of the back and with those severe lippings. On the other side of that back, it's fairly smooth, but this has been curved. There's a little bit of what we call scoliosis going on, or degenerative joint disease complicating the scoliosis. There are other kinds of osteoarthritis. They occur most frequently in the fingers. As a matter of fact, in women in the middle age group, we find finger joints getting enlarged. These knuckles that I'm indicating here, the distal ones and the proximal ones, or the tip of the finger and the other knuckles, tend to get enlarged and over a period of time can cause a lot of discomfort. It tends to be a hereditary problem. It occurs more in women, and so mothers and daughters may have it. It doesn't usually start till about age 50. Fortunately, this kind of arthritis doesn't spread through the body. It's a localized problem. We don't know what causes it for sure, but it is one of the kinds of arthritis that I rather enjoy treating because we can give appropriate medicines or even inject a small amount of medicine into one of those joints and help cut down the pain and swelling. Fortunately, the pain doesn't last too long. Most of the time it's just a few weeks. Then gradually the pain will go away as well as some of the soft swelling, and what we're left with is calcium deposited around the joint, so that the joint may look a little bit enlarged, it may be twisted just slightly, so it's more a problem actually in the long run of cosmetics rather than actual pain. It's reassuring to know that that kind of arthritis doesn't spread through the whole body. Another very common point for arthritis is right at the thumb base. Right here where the thumb joins the hand at the base of the thumb, that's a fulcrum. As you're lifting and squeezing or holding something, the thumb pushes against the rest of the finger, so to speak, and we have a fulcrum effect so that this joint can wear out faster than most of the rest of the joints in the body would wear out. That's another point that's a little bit difficult to treat. Occasionally we'll inject it, but medication can also help. The point actually is, if you're using those hands and twisting, ladies, in the kitchen, you're trying to open a jar lid that's really hard to open, I would suggest you give it to your husband and let him get the arthritis. Well, we wouldn't want to do that either, really. Get one of those V-shaped, toothed instruments you can put up underneath your cupboard. You can put the jar in it, and then you can use your arms and your body to open the jar lid rather than wasting your thumb base here and getting into difficulty doing that. I've seen so many patients with this thumb pain that it's really kind of an uncomfortable situation, and the only way to really prevent it is to avoid that excess stress on the base of your thumb. I should tell you a story about my mom. She's 82 years of age and really quite healthy. She likes to garden. She spends a lot of time out of doors. It was about 20 years ago, I think, that she complained to me of this pain in her thumb and what could we do about it. It turned out to me, as I looked at it, that she was having quite a bit of discomfort because she was out picking in her garden. She was using a pick trying to get some of the clay broken down for a garden. And I said, look, Mom, if you want to keep those joints healthy, you're going to have to stop that picking. Get somebody else to do it so that you don't wear out your thumb. Well, it took a few months for it to get back pretty much to normal, but I don't think it's been much of a problem since, and she's still gardening, but using somebody else like a tractor to take care of some of those hard to dig areas in the ground. So you can protect yourself against some of those changes by using your body prudently. Don't push too hard for something that can be done mechanically. Don't let your joints wear out, but use something mechanical to avoid that stress and strain. Well, prevention of arthritis. Can you prevent arthritis? My feeling is yes, if you'll approach it with a consistent, graduated exercise program to strengthen your muscles and get to the point where your muscles and your bones are strong and you're going to be able to keep from the kind of problems that we've described today as osteoarthritis or wear and tear arthritis. If you have damaged joints, the exercise that you can do is bicycling or swimming or some mild calisthenics, such as is often done just on the floor in your living room. That will help your joints stay strong, and you don't have to be out there pounding the pavement, if you will. You don't have to be exercising by walking or jogging, but just bicycling on a stationary bike at home or swimming. Those are two excellent exercises. The calisthenics that can be done, as long as they're not impact aerobics, can also be quite helpful. Remember, we're talking about balance. You've got to balance the one side of too much with the other side of too little. We often tend to go to extremes as humans. That's kind of our tendency, isn't it? We fall into the ditch on one side of the road or the other. So we're consistently asking you to be balanced, a balanced lifestyle for healthy living, and to prevent disease. And over a long period of time, you can do that. You can either underdo it or overdo it. Most of us overdo it in the case of strain on our joints, but underdoing it is a better approach to a certain extent, and a consistent exercise program will do it for you. Let's go back to our text for a minute now and think about what God has promised about what's going to happen with this world of ours. The firmament will get old, the heavens are getting old, the earth is getting old, but God has promised He's going to be there. He's not going to pass away. He's the one that will not be vanishing. They shall pass away, but thou endurest. Like clothes, they shall all grow old. Thou shalt cast them off like a cloak, and they shall vanish. Psalms 102:26. But remember, God is still there, and He's keeping our bodies healthy if we cooperate with Him to do our part. But it takes some effort. It takes some planning. It's not going to happen. You've got to plan to do it for yourself. You've got to be consistent and determined enough to get out there and work on it. And you can, if you will, keep your body younger and grow old gracefully by following God's plan for balanced living.